I came across an excerpt from Keith Law in his book Smart Baseball, and he talked about this idea of a productive out. And he said the productive out is a myth, and that there is no such thing as a productive out. That runner on second base, nobody out, advancing a runner to third base with one out is a totally useless idea in today's game, because the data and the expected value suggests that it's a flawed model, and he argues that there is a right way to think about baseball, and that right way dismisses productive outs. So I played professional baseball, not long and not well, but that experience has led me to believe the exact opposite. And yet I also teach statistics, sports statistics, and we often get into this idea of expected value. I recently came across this idea, this mathematical idea that I had never heard of before. Ole Peters is the guy that really proposes this idea, and I'm hesitant to even say the name, but it's Ergodicity, and basically it talks about why I think Keith Law is wrong, and I think, maybe I shouldn't say wrong, but wrong at certain times. And I think it's a branch of mathematics that baseball folks need to start accepting, so their managers and their scouts and all those folks don't get overly frustrated, because in many ways the scouts, the managers, the people in the dugout know exactly what they're talking about, and the data betrays them. So here's the idea. First of all, expected value is the same thing as average. Anytime you talk about average and you dismiss the variation of that average, you're neglecting a huge component. So these six random variables and these six variables all lead us to the same expected value, this idea of 3. And yet, as you look at that, you know that if in fact these were runs scored and you had 5 zeros and 1 18, that's a very misleading statistic. This right here has no variation, and yet they produce the same expected value. So what Ole Peters talks about in this idea of ergodicity, and I wish I didn't have to say the word because it scares a lot of people, but what he talks about is you can't access parallel universes. So when I teach sports statistics, or statistics at all, I'll often present this wager. Would you be willing to increase your wealth by 60% on a toss of a heads, and decrease your wealth by 40% on the toss of a tail, right? So up 60%, down 40%. And they think about it a little bit. Most agree. Most say it feels like a reasonable expectation. And when you run that calculation, you get an expected value of higher than your dollar, or higher than your net worth. So expected value says, yes, you should play this game, right? Expected value in Keith Law's world says, follow the expected value. Do what the expected value says. Productive outs are bad. Don't follow that. But Ole Peters suggests, and Ergodicity suggests, that there's a difference between this model and what he calls a time series model, okay? And baseball coaches know that things happen in sequence. So if you hit a ground ball to the second baseman with nobody out, you ask your teammates to applaud you, stand up, get it up for that guy. If you do it with 1 out, you're not going to be as receptive, because he's now at third base with 2 outs. Things happen in succession. They don't happen independent of each other. All right. So if you take that same bet and you toss a heads and your wealth goes up by 60%, and then you toss a tails and it goes down by 40%, you actually lose money. And every time you iterate that process, you lose more and more and more money. Right? And this is what baseball coaches feel in that dugout. They feel that it doesn't matter what the expected value is, because once you hit 0, all the other values are no longer in play. Right? You have this idea of ruin. You are ruined and the game is over. In this model, you have the ability to access every value. And Ole Peters says you can't access parallel universes. And the reason why the expected value happens the way it does is because in all these parallel universes, as long as one of those worlds goes to infinity, it will offset every other world that goes to 0. Right? And if you follow the idea that heads and tails happen back and forth, they happen with equal probability, the majority of people will fall. The majority of baseball coaches will go to 0, 0, 0, 0. But you have this one outlier that goes to infinity, and it affects the entire average, and it pulls. It gives us this misleading idea that the expected value is actually something that we should engage in, that we should entertain. So I don't know if any people are talking about ergodicity in the sports world. To me, I think it's a huge idea. When I discovered it, I said, oh, that's why baseball folks and data folks disagree, because data folks talk in the law of large numbers, where every event is independent and is removed from its time perspective. And baseball coaches think in terms of time, and they know every event is dependent on what comes before it and what comes after it. So until these two ideas get reconciled, I think you're always going to be at odds. And there's a time and a place for the big inning. If you're in the 9th inning, the big inning is not accessible, and you can only maybe sometimes settle for 1 run or 2 runs, but certainly 0 is not an attractive option.